Let's look at Part 8, Pregnancy and Human Development, and we're at page 1085, and we have a nice picture describing the initiation events and subsequent events that represent the positive feedback homeostasis of the labor and child delivery type of period here. And so parturition or birth, the use of the term labor is very apt. Some people never get around to running a marathon in their life, but the first period or the first experience of childbirth can sometimes be 2 or 3 times as long as a full marathon. So this is labor in the most profound sense in some ways. A 10 or 12 hour period of labor and contraction is considerably more than what might be experienced in even an ultra marathon. So here we have this idea here. I've replicated a portion of that graph that showed progesterone in relationship to estrogen, and I'm just sort of representing the end of the period of pregnancy here, in which progesterone kind of drops off and estrogen remains high. Oftentimes they're using the term estrogens to indicate that this is a family or group of molecules that are present, each of which have their specific duties, and that some are in higher concentration than others. But now we've lost the quieting effects and the effects of progesterone that would lead to the biosynthetic pathways of growth and differentiation, and now something entirely different is about to happen. And so we should look at, we have a 1, 2, 3 here that indicates for us. They refer to this as the rise in estrogens. I would prefer to see it as the dropping off of progesterone. So that's, you can look at it either way, but estrogens now are predominating, and we're no longer having the synergistic effects of the combination of estrogens and progesterone in combo. Right, so now these are the predominant molecules, the estrogens. And there's 3 important consequences that we need to focus on. A little, here's the 1, and then over here is the 2, over here is the 3. Let's look at these. We're going to consider the stimulation of the myometrium cells because we're having, or we're forming an abundance, it says here, of oxytocin receptors. Remember, oxytocin not only is a central nervous system neurotransmitter, it's also a hormone that goes out throughout the woman's body to wherever estrogen has prepared oxytocin receptors. And now with this higher level of estrogen, the oxytocin receptors are really growing quickly, and they're in essence naked without the influence of progesterone anymore. Okay, so that's sort of a twitchy, contractile situation that's going on. There's numerous oxytocin receptors. Number 2, it's going to promote the rise in estrogen, that is to say, is going to promote the formation of gap junctions between uterine smooth muscle cells. This is sort of unusual, something that we see in the heart. The heart has waves of depolarization to move the liquid connective tissue of blood through its chambers. And so now we're having a similar situation here, where we have the creation or accommodation of wave-like stimulations. So depolarization, wave-like depolarization, from one cell to the next in a wave-like manner, and then also the contraction is very peristaltic. Okay, so when we think about the contraction happening at certain intervals and then lasting for a period of time, it's lasting for a period of time as a peristaltic motion, right? Squeezing out, as it were. Okay, and then number 3. Number 3 is, I wouldn't necessarily think of this as antagonizing progesterone's quieting. I don't know why they put it that way, but there's less progesterone. Progesterone is the quieting molecule, and it has dropped off in concentration, right? And so for that reason, estrogen is having its way, and it's creating this sort of scenario here now in which things are a bit twitchy, and when the twitches occur, they lead to wave-like depolarizations and wave-like peristaltic actions of the muscle. Okay, so initially when one experiences this, they're referred to as Braxton-Hicks contractions. So we don't have the true initiation of labor yet. This is referred to as false labor because it's just the general condition of the uterine smooth muscle at this particular time, is that it's become twitchy and that the twitches lead to wave-like contractions within the system. But there is a next stage which actually creates an entire organization that utilizes mom's pituitary hypothalamus, and the baby is also engaged and the uterine tissues are engaged. So here we have true labor, and so we have to now think about the actual organized activity in the atmosphere of this thing that was just described. So it says here that certain fetal cells begin to produce oxytocin. So apart from the oxytocin that's coming from mom's posterior pituitary, we have some oxytocin coming from the fetus when Beba is ready to make the next move toward entering into the world. There is a release of oxytocin, and there's a decision that's made based on the developmental process of the baby. Okay, this leads, when the oxytocin is released, this causes the placenta to form and release prostaglandins. It should be noted here that prostaglandins and oxytocin are both very powerful stimulants of the uterine smooth muscle. So they're going to be acting together. This diagram up here describes the whole dynamic of positive feedback homeostasis. If you look carefully here, that at every single arrowhead, we should be seeing positives. There's nothing to turn off or inhibit. There's everything to turn on and to stimulate. There's estrogen coming from mom, now unimpeded by progesterone, and ever increasing the amount of receptors on the surface of the uterine smooth muscle. We have also mom's oxytocin is being released, and especially because the infant here is engaged in its own cyclical activity at this more proximal level of release of oxytocin and the development of prostaglandins that act specifically in the vicinity of the uterus. And we get then this long branch stimulus here, which goes all the way up to mom's posterior pituitary and releases oxytocin. Okay, and then we get an ever-increasing stimulus with the more oxytocin, and with this, things are building, right? So we have sort of a Ravel's bolero. We have a raga of ever-increasing beat and intensity. Okay, so here this sets the stage then for this next part, which I will take separately, and we'll take a look at dilation and birth now that we've got the hormonal activity engaged. Okay, that's coming next.